I have buried a lot of horses in my life. You dig the pit downwind, you do it fast, and you don't look at the eye. That's the rule. Every man who has ever worked stock knows that rule, even the ones who'd never say it out loud. An animal that can't stand is an animal that's already gone. You just haven't caught up to the fact yet. So when the sergeant told that boy to put his mare down and get back in the column, the sergeant wasn't being cruel. He was being right. Every single man on that ridge, me included, knew he was right. And that boy looked up at us, mud to his elbows, his mare's blood soaking through the knees of his trousers, 40 miles of bad country between us and anything safe. And he said no. Not please, not give me a minute, just no. I have thought about that no for the rest of my life. I'm going to tell you what it cost him and what it cost me for staying to watch. Some of you are going to think he was a fool. For a while, I did too. Stay with me to the end. I need to tell somebody how it turned out, and there's nobody left who was there but me. The mare went down at the shallow crossing, and the sound she made is the first thing I remember. Not a scream. People think a hurt horse screams. Mostly they don't. She gave this low, tearing groan like a door that hadn't been opened in a long time, and her front legs folded under her in the gray water, and the whole column bunched up behind her the way water bunches behind a stone. 14 men, tired to the marrow, and every one of them stopped. I was riding drag that day, which is where they always put me behind everybody, eating everybody's dust, close enough to be useful and far enough back that nobody had to look at my face and decide how they felt about it. They called me Bly. My mother's people had another name for me, but the soldiers couldn't hold it in their mouths, so Bly it was, short for something, short for nothing. I scouted, I read sign, I kept the horses sound, and I kept a little tally book in my breast pocket that nobody knew about, in which I wrote the name of every horse I ever put my hands on. It was a habit my grandfather would not have understood and my mother would have found sad. I found it necessary. A man should be counted by something. I counted them. Her name was June. I knew it before the boy said it, because I'd watered her twice on the trail and she'd leaned her whole head into my chest both times like she'd known me since foaling. And a horse that trusting always has a name that means something. When he came splashing back up the line and dropped into the water beside her, I heard him say it, June, June, up, up now, come on, in the flat coaxing voice you use on a colt. And I closed my little book and put it away, because I already suspected I was about to see something I would want to remember and would not want to write down. The boy was Corporal Silas Rowe, 19, maybe 20. Farm hands, farm shoulders, a sunburn that never turned to tan, and a way of ducking his head when an officer spoke to him, like the words might be thrown rather than said. He talked to the mare more than he'd talked to any of us the whole march. I'd noticed that. You notice a man who prefers horses. It's usually because the horses have treated him better. The wound was in her chest high, where the shoulder rolls into the neck. A ball, she'd caught it in the skirmish 2 days back, the one where we lost Hollies and the pack mule, and she'd carried Silas clear out of the wash with it in her, run 4 miles with a lead ball working deeper into her every stride, and not made a sound until now. She'd carried him out. That's the part I want you to hold on to. She was dying because she had done exactly what she was made to do, which was save the boy on her back, and she had waited to fall down until she was sure he was somewhere she considered safe. Sergeant Prout rode up alongside me and looked down at the two of them in the water for a long moment. Prout was a good sergeant, which is a rarer thing than a good man. He'd kept 11 of us alive through country that had every reason to kill all 14, and he did it by never once letting his heart make a decision his head should be making. "Corporal," he said, "get off her." Silas didn't get off her. He was kneeling in the crossing with her big head pulled up into his lap, keeping her nose out of the water, and the water was moving fast enough that it took some strength to do it, and you could see in the cords of his neck that he was spending that strength freely. Corporal Rowe, Prout didn't raise his voice. That was the frightening thing about him. That animal is done. You know it and I know it, We are 11 hours from the fort if we push, and we do not have 11 hours before that war party works out where we crossed. You will do her the kindness, and you will do it now, and you will fall in." "She's not down for good," Silas said. He didn't look up. "She's just tired. She stood up twice this morning, Sergeant. She just needs off her feet a while. If I can get her to the far bank in the shade." "She is bleeding into her chest," Prout said. "She is drowning in herself. There is no far bank for her. Do it clean, or I will have Bly do it, and it will be quick, and it will be over, and we will all be sorry, and then we will ride." That was the moment the whole thing turned on, and I have gone back to it 1,000 times to see if there was a version where it went the ordinary way, where the boy wept and did the terrible thing and got back on somebody's spare, and we all rode away carrying it silently the way soldiers carry things. That version existed. It was right there. It was the sane one. Silas looked up. I want to describe his face, but I've never been good at it. He wasn't crying. That surprised me. His jaw was working the way a jaw works when a man is deciding whether to be sick, and his eyes had gone very flat and very far, and there was mud dried in the creases of his knuckles where he'd been pressing the wound trying to slow it. And he said the thing. "No, sir." The whole column heard it. You could feel it move down the line, man to man, the way cold moves through water. "No, sir," he said again, steadier the second time, like he was as surprised as anybody that the first one had held. "I won't. You can leave me. I'll catch you up. But I'm not shooting her, and I'm not leaving her, and I'll take whatever you want to give me for it back at the fort. I just won't do it, Sergeant. She wouldn't have done it to me." Now I have thought hard about why nobody laughed. It would have been easy to laugh. It was, on its face, an insane thing to say. A dying horse doesn't make decisions about loyalty. A dying horse is meat and mercy and a hole in the ground. Every man there knew it. Nobody laughed. I think it was because every one of us had, at some point, been the thing that got left. You don't get to a place like that ridge, in an army like that one, in a life like ours, without having been abandoned by something you'd have died for. And here was this boy, this ordinary sunburned farm boy, saying out loud the thing all of us had wanted said over us at least once and never got. "I won't leave you. Do what you want to me. I won't." Prout sat his horse and looked at him for a long time. A muscle moved in his cheek. "You have got no idea what you're asking," he said finally, and it wasn't a question, and it wasn't quite an order any more either. "No, sir," Silas agreed. "I guess I don't." Prout looked at the sky, which was doing nothing, and then at the ridgeline behind us, which was doing nothing yet, and then, God help him, at me. "Bly, Sergeant, how far to the fort if a man was leading a lame animal at a walk? Honest." I did the arithmetic I'd been doing in the back of my head since the mare went down, because that's the kind of arithmetic that keeps you alive. 3 days, I said, if the animal lives, which it won't. 2 days if he's dragging a dead horse and won't admit it, which is the same as saying he'll be alone in the open the third night with the war party between him and the walls. That's what I make it too. Prout chewed the inside of his cheek. Then he said the thing that changed my life, and I don't think he thought twice about it, and I have thought about it every day since. "Then you'll stay with him." I said several words I won't repeat. Prout let me finish them. "He's going to get himself killed for a horse," Prout said when I was done. "That's his business. He's a grown man and a soldier, and he's made his choice. But I'm not going to let him get killed alone and lost, because that's on my conscience, and my conscience already keeps me up plenty. You know this country. You've got the eyes. Get him and that animal to the fort, or get him to the fort without it when it dies, which it will, tonight or tomorrow, and then he'll come easy. Either way, you bring me back my corporal. That's the order. You don't have to like it." "I don't," I said. "Noted," said Prout. He was already turning his horse. "Bly, look at me." I looked at him. His face, just for a second, was not the sergeant's face. I'd have shot the horse, and I'd have been right to, but I've buried a lot of men who did the right thing, and I'm sick of it. Let's you and me see what happens if we let the boy do the wrong one for once. Maybe nothing. Maybe he learns why we don't. And then he was gone, and the column was moving, and the water closed back over where they'd stood, and in about the time it takes to build a small fire, Silas Rowe and I were alone at a river crossing in the worst country I knew, with a dying mare between us and the night coming on. I'm going to be honest with you about how I felt, because if I'm not, none of the rest of this means anything. I hated him. Not in a large way. In the small, grinding, tired way you hate a stone in your boot. I was going to die in the open for this boy's sentiment, and I was furious, and I sat down on a rock upstream of him and got out my tally book, the only comfort I had, and I did not write June's name in it, out of a spite I'm not proud of. As if not writing her name could make her less real. As if I could refuse her the way he was refusing to give her up. He didn't notice, he was working. That's the thing about Silas Rowe that I'd missed, and that I want you to see now, because it's the whole story. He wasn't sitting in the water weeping over a doomed animal. That's what I expected. That's what would have been easy to pity and easy to dismiss. Instead, he had already dragged himself out of his misery, and into the only thing that was any use, which was work, and he was doing it well and fast and without wasting emotion. And I watched him do it with my arms crossed and my jaw set. And somewhere in the first hour, my hatred started to leak out of me, and I couldn't have told you exactly when. He couldn't lift her. No man can lift a horse, but he could get her up. He got her up by making her want to. He talked to her the whole time in that low farm voice, and he got behind her and put his shoulder into her flank and he pinched her, hard, in the spot behind the girth that makes a horse gather itself. And he pulled on the lead and he cursed and he begged, and June, God, that mare, June tried. She tried because he asked her to. She got her forelegs planted and heaved and slipped and went down, and he never once got angry at her for going down. He just started over, good girl. That's it, again now. And on the fourth try she came up onto all four legs and stood there swaying with her head hung low and the pink froth already showing at one nostril. And Silas leaned his forehead against her wet neck, and I heard him say thank you. To the horse, he thanked the horse. I put my book away. She can't cross here, I said. It was the first thing I'd said to him. My voice came out rougher than I meant. Current's too strong for her the way she is. She'll go down midstream and you'll lose her in the water, and that's a worse death than the clean one you already turned down. There's a 4.5 mile up, slower water, rock bottom. We take her there. He looked at me like I'd handed him something. You'll help. I'll do my job, I said, which wasn't the same thing, and we both knew it wasn't, and neither of us said so. The half-mile to the upper ford took us until dark. I want you to sit with that. A half-mile. In the time it took, I could have walked to the fort and most of the way back if the fort were where I wished it was. But a mare with a ball in her chest walks the way an old man climbs stairs, a few steps, a long stop, a gathering of everything she has, a few more steps, and Silas walked at her shoulder the whole way with his hand flat on her neck, and I walked ahead reading the ground and reading the ridgeline and reading, mostly, the two of them, because I had never in my life seen anything quite like it, and I have not seen it since. Here is what I learned about him in that half-mile, in pieces, the way he let it out, not because I asked, but because a man walking through fear will sometimes talk to keep from listening to it. His brother had broken the mare. Older brother, Amos, gone 2 years now, the war before this one, the big one, the one that ate brothers by the 100,000. Amos had gentled June from a spooky yearling into the best cow horse in 3 counties, and when the notice came about Amos, their mother had wanted to sell the mare because she couldn't stand to look at her, and Silas, 16 then, had stood in the kitchen and refused. First time in his life he'd refused his mother anything. No, he'd said. Same word. She's the last thing his hands made, and I won't sell her. So when the sergeant said shoot her, Silas told me, not looking at me, looking at the ridge where the light was going, it wasn't I know how it looked. I know it looked like a boy being soft over a horse, but it's not the horse. He stopped and June stopped with him and he pressed his hand into her neck. It's that she's the last one who remembers him the way I do. Everybody else remembers a soldier, a hero, a name they read off a paper. She remembers a boy who used to sneak her sugar and sing to her off-key. Nobody's got that but me and her, he swallowed. If she goes, then it's just me. And I can't be the only one left who knew him that way. I can't carry it by myself. I'm not strong enough. That's the truth of it. I'm not doing this because I'm brave. I'm doing it because I'm scared to be the only one. And that, right there, is where I stopped being able to tell myself I was only doing my job. Because I understood him. God help me, I understood him completely. I had my own June. Everybody does. Everybody has some living thing that is the last witness to a version of themselves that the world has otherwise agreed to forget, and everybody knows the particular terror of watching that witness start to die. I just never heard anybody say it. I'd certainly never said it. My people don't, and the army surely doesn't, and I'd built a whole quiet life out of not saying it. I took out my book. I wrote her name, June, bay mare star off hind sock, chest wound, refused to die on schedule. I wrote that last part and I didn't fully know why. We got her across the upper ford in the last of the light, both of us in the water to our waists on the downstream side of her in case she staggered. And she made it. She made it. She came up the far bank blowing pink foam and shaking and alive. And Sela's made a sound that was half a laugh and half something worse. And we got her into a stand of cottonwood where the ground was soft, and we could keep a fire small and hidden. And I told him it was a foolish thing we'd done, and he agreed. And we did not put the mare down, and the night came all the way in. She lived through the night. I hadn't thought she would. I took the first watch and the second, because Silas hadn't slept in the better part of 3 days, and he was no use to me falling asleep on watch, so I let him lie down in the leaves against June's warm side. She was down again by then, but breathing, always breathing, that wet, effortful breathing. And I sat with my rifle across my knees, and I watched the dark, and I watched the horse, and I kept my little fire smaller than a hat. Around what I judged to be the middle of the night, the mare's breathing changed. I've heard the change before. It gets slower and it gets deeper, and there's a rattle way down in it, and I knew it, and I sat there in the cold thinking, this is the mercy. She's going to do it herself in her sleep, and the boy won't have to, and I won't have to, and in the morning we'll bury her and walk out, and it'll be sad, but it'll be finished. And I was relieved. I want to be honest. I was relieved, and I was ashamed of the relief, and I sat there holding both of those things and watching a horse die in the dark. And then she stopped dying. I don't know how else to say it. The rattle eased. The breathing came back up out of that deep place and steadied, and she shifted, and she put her nose out and found Silas's sleeping shoulder with it and just rested it there, on the boy, and went back to breathing the ordinary hard way instead of the final easy way, and I sat there with my mouth open like a fool, and I understood that she had turned back, and I understood more slowly, and with a coldness that had nothing to do with the night air, that she had turned back for him. That whatever was pulling her down, the small weight of that boy's shoulder under her nose had been enough to hold her on this side of it. One more time. I have watched a lot of things die. I had never watched one refuse. 2 of them now, the boy and the mare, both of them refusing. And me sitting between them with my rifle and my tally book, the sane one, the one who knew the rules, the one who'd been sent along precisely because I knew you don't do this. And I found that I did not any longer want to be the sane one. I found that I wanted them both to make it, wildly against sense, against the country and the war party and the ball in her chest and the whole indifferent arithmetic of the world. And I understood that at some point in the last 12 hours I had quietly changed sides. Not from the army to the boy. From the living to the, I don't have the word. From the ones who accept the rules to the ones who don't. Toward dawn Silas woke and found her breathing and found me watching and found, I think, something in my face, because he sat up slow and quiet and said, "She made it through." "She made it through," I said. He nodded. He reached up and stroked the long bone of her face. And then he said the thing that I have carried longer than almost anything else anyone has said to me, and he said it plain, not knowing it was anything. "Thank you for staying," he said. "You could have made it hard for me. You didn't. You could have told me the truth all night that she's going to die anyway. You didn't do that either. She might not, I said. It was the first time I'd let myself say it. It felt like stepping off something. Die anyway, she might not. He looked at me. 19 years old, 40 miles of killing country still to cross, a wounded horse he loved more than his own life, and a war party somewhere out there in the graying dark looking for our sign. He smiled. It cracked his sunburned lip, and a bead of blood came up and he didn't notice. No, he said, I don't reckon she will. The second day is the one that nearly killed all three of us, and it started with June standing up on her own. I woke to Silas's voice, not words, just a sound, the involuntary sound a man makes when something he's been praying for happens and he doesn't trust it, and I came up off the ground with my rifle before I was fully awake, expecting the war party, expecting the worst, and instead there was the mare, on her feet, swaying head low, the wound crusted black now and drawn up tight, but standing and cropping, actually cropping, a little at the thin grass by the water, which is a thing a dying horse does not do. Horses that are giving up stop eating. It's the surest sign there is. And here she was, tearing off little mouthfuls of poor cottonwood grass like she had somewhere to be. She's hungry, Silas said, and his voice broke clean in half on the second word. Bly, she's hungry. I see it, I said. I did see it. What I didn't say, because you learn in that country to keep the second half of the truth in your pocket, was that a rally like this can be the last flare of a burning lamp as much as a real turn. I'd seen animals eat a good meal and die 4 hours later. I'd seen men do it too. But I'd also, exactly once now, seen this same mare turn back from the edge in the dark for no reason a doctor could name, and I was done, after that, telling the difference between what was possible and what wasn't. So I said I see it, and I meant it as more of a prayer than I'd have admitted, and we got her rigged to walk. We made better time that morning than I'd feared and worse than we needed. She walked. She actually walked, slow, stopping often, but of her own will, with Silas at her head and me ranging ahead and to the flanks reading the ground. And the ground, that morning, started telling me things I didn't like. Unshod pony tracks crossing our line maybe 6 hours old. Then an hour on the same tracks again, fresher, which meant they weren't just passing through, they were quartering the country, cutting for sign, looking for us most likely, or for the column, or for anything with a scalp and a horse. I didn't tell Silas the whole of it. I told him enough. We're not alone out here. Keep her quiet. Keep to the low ground. Do what I say when I say it, and don't ask me why until tonight. He nodded, and he did it. Whatever else that farm boy was, he was steady when steadiness cost him, and that is rarer than courage and worth more. Midday, we nearly walked into them. I smelled it before I saw it, horse and wood smoke, and under it the particular green rot smell of a spring seep, and I put my hand up flat and Silas stopped the mare dead with a touch, and we stood in the bottom of a dry wash in a silence so total I could hear June's wet breathing in my own heart, and over the lip of the wash, not 30 yards off, the sound of men. 4 of them, maybe 5, watering their ponies at the seep, talking low. Not hunting, right then, just resting, the way we'd rested, but between us and the only line to the fort I could trust, and if the mare made one sound, one whicker at the smell of their horses, it was finished. All of it. The whole thing we'd bled for since the crossing. And June lifted her head. I saw her nostrils widen. I saw her ears come up. I saw her draw the breath that comes before a horse calls out to other horses, that deep gathering breath, and there was nothing I could do. I was 6 feet away and a shout myself would damn us. And Silas, who was right at her head, did the only thing there was. He clamped his hand over her nostrils, both of them, and he leaned his whole weight and his whole face into her, cheek against her cheek, his mouth right at the base of her ear, and he breathed into her long, slow, deliberate, the way you'd breathe to calm a panicking child, and he held her nose shut against the call for as long as a man can hold his own breath and then longer, his knuckles white, tears standing in his eyes from the strain of it or from something else, and June wounded, half dead, terrified, wanting more than anything to answer the horses she smelled. Held it in, for him, again. She stood there shaking with a farm boy's hand crushed over her muzzle and her lungs full of unspent sound, and she did not call out because he asked her not to, and she had never once in her life failed to do the hard thing he asked. I have seen brave things. I have done a few. I never saw anything braver than a dying horse choosing to keep silent because a boy she loved was afraid. The men at the seat finished watering. It took a year. It took about 10 minutes. And then their voices moved off and their ponies' feet moved off, up and over the far rise, unhurried, never knowing. And when the sound of them was finally gone, Silas took his hand from her nose and she let out the breath at last, soft into his chest. And he slid down her leg into the sand of the wash and sat there and shook, and I let him. I stood watch and let him shake. It's a thing a man has earned after that. To sit down in the dirt and shake. You saved us, I told him when he could hear me. He shook his head. His hands were still trembling. She did, he said. She could have called. She wanted to. I felt how bad she wanted to. He looked up at me and there was something in his face I hadn't seen before, a kind of awe, almost fear. How does she know, Bly? How does she know to be quiet when I've never once taught her that? Amos never taught her that. How does she know what it means? I didn't have an answer then. I've had years to find one and I'm still not sure I have it. The best I've got is this. Love teaches things that no man can. She didn't know about war parties or scalps or the fort 40 miles off. She knew he was afraid and she knew he needed her, and for a creature that loves you, sometimes that's the whole of the education. She held her breath because he asked. There's no deeper reason and there doesn't need to be one. I didn't say all that. What I said was, get up, we move while they're moving away from us. We might make the river camp by dark. We didn't make the river camp by dark. That's where I have to tell you the hard part. Late in the afternoon, with the light going long and gold and the fort maybe a day and a half off if everything broke right, June stopped, and this time she didn't start again. It wasn't dramatic. That's what I want you to understand about how these things actually go, out from under the stories people tell later. There was no scream, no rearing, no noble collapse. She just stopped walking, in the middle of a wide grassy flat with the sun on her, and she stood there a moment. And then she lowered herself down onto the ground the careful way a horse does when it has decided to lie down and mean it, folding first the forelegs and then the rest. And she lay out flat on her side in the gold grass and let out a breath that had the whole day in it. And she did not gather herself to rise. Silas was on his knees beside her before she'd finished going down. No, he said. No, June, come on, we're close. We're so close up now, come on, the same coaxing, the same pinch behind the girth. The same low farm voice, and she rolled one eye to look at him, and I swear to you she was sorry. I swear the look she gave him was an apology, and she did not get up. He worked at it for the better part of an hour. I let him. I want it on the record that I let him work at it far longer than sense allowed, because I had by then given up sense entirely where these two were concerned, and because I could not be the one to tell him to stop. But the light was going, and the war party was somewhere out in that failing light, and I knew, I had known since she went down that this was the wall. This was the far bank there was no reaching, and I had one job left in the world, and it was the ugliest one Prout could have given me. Bring me back my corporal. Silas, I said. He didn't answer. He had her head in his lap again, the way he had at the very first crossing, a full day and a lifetime ago, keeping her nose up out of nothing now, out of habit, out of love, and he was stroking the long bone of her face, and he had stopped asking her to get up. Silas, look at me. He looked at me, and he already knew. I could see that he already knew and that he had known for a while, and that the only thing left that he didn't know was whether he'd have to do it himself, and I found that I could not make him do that. Not this boy. Not after all of it. There are mercies you can ask a man to perform, and there are ones you take onto your own soul so he doesn't have to. And I had been carrying an empty place in my chest for a long time, and I decided, right there in the gold grass, to fill it with this. Let me, I said. You've done everything. There was nothing you didn't do, you hear me? Nothing. But you can't be the one and you don't have to be. That's what I'm for, let me. He shook his head once and then he stopped shaking it, and he bent down over her and put his face against her face, and he stayed there a while, breathing her in, and he told her some things I didn't listen to because they weren't for me, and then he straightened up and moved back and said, in a voice scraped down to nothing at all, she doesn't like loud sounds behind her left ear. Do it from the do it where she can't see it coming. Please. I will, I said. And I did. I'm not going to describe it. I told you at the very start of this that the rule is you don't look at the eye, and I have kept that rule my whole life, and I'll keep it now for her. It was quick. It was quiet. She never saw it coming, and she never knew a moment of fear, because the last thing in her whole world was a boy's face against her face and a boy's voice telling her she was good. She was so good. She was the best one. And then nothing, and it was done, and the sun was down. And I stood there with a warm rifle and a wet face, and I understood that I had at last, after a lifetime of doing the right thing, done the thing that was needed instead, and that they are not always the same, and that the difference between them is the whole of what it costs to be alive. We buried her in the dark, which you're never supposed to do, because you can't see to make it deep enough and the diggers come in the night. I didn't care. We dug with our hands and my knife and a flat rock, and it took us most of the night, and we didn't speak. And when it was done, Silas knelt by the turned earth and didn't pray exactly, just knelt there. And I stood watch over him the way I'd stood watch over her. And when the sky started to gray, he stood up stiff and old and said, "All right." Just that, all right. The two hardest words in the language when a man means them the way he meant them. We walked into the fort a day and a half later, the two of us, no horses, filthy, silent, alive. Prout met us at the gate. He looked at Silas and he looked at me and he looked at the empty place where a led horse should have been, and he understood all of it without a word, the way good sergeants do. He put his hand on Silas's shoulder. He didn't say the horse's name. He didn't say "I told you so," which he'd have been entitled to. He said, "Corporal, report to the surgeon and then get some sleep. That's an order," which was his way of saying the only kind thing the army had allowed him to say, which was, "You're still one of mine, and I'm glad you're not dead, and I'm sorry." And Silas said, "Yes, Sergeant," and went. Prout turned to me. He studied my face for a while. "Well," he said, "did he learn why we don't?" And I thought about it. I thought about the mare turning back in the dark for the weight of a shoulder. I thought about her holding her breath against the call with a boy's hand crushed over her nose. I thought about "Thank you for staying," and she doesn't like loud sounds behind her left ear, and the gold grass, and the shallow dark grave, and the two hardest words in the language. "No," I said, "he didn't. He learned something else." "What?" I didn't have it in words yet. It took me years to get it into words, and I'm still not certain these are the right ones, but they're the closest I've come, and I'll give them to you the way I finally gave them to myself, alone, long after everyone else who was there had gone into the ground themselves. He didn't learn why we don't. He learned that the reasons we don't, the arithmetic, the country, the war party, the ball in the chest, the whole cold sane sum of it, are all completely true, and that they don't matter. He learned that you do the wrong thing anyway for the ones who'd have done it for you, and that it costs you everything, and that it's still, somehow in the only account that finally gets tallied, worth the whole terrible price. I never told him I put her name in my book. I never told anybody until now. She's the only one in there who refused to die on schedule. I left that line just as I wrote it. When I go, and the book goes with me, that's the one I want somebody someday to find and wonder about.